They said the fog clung thicker around her tavern than anywhere else in the valley, that the smoke rising from her chimney was scented with memory and grief. In the hamlet of Dunwell, the Tavern Witch was both myth and neighbor, lived alone, spoke little, eyes the color of overcast skies. The year was unknown, the war distant, yet its aftershocks trembled quietly in the bones of the old. The inn stood on a hill overlooking the marsh, half forgotten and shunned, except by those too broken to care what people said. Her name, once spoken by lovers and siblings, had been buried long ago under whispers. Only strangers knocked now, and even they did so with hesitation. But that night, under the blue hush of snowfall, a lone traveler with tired boots and a haunted face pushed open the heavy oak door. His breath steamed, his voice cracked. He asked for warmth, and maybe a drink to forget. She poured the brew herself, amber, steaming, strange. He sipped it without question, and as the fire cracked and shadows danced upon his worn hands, a tear slid from his eye, not from pain, but because, in the crackle and scent of smoke, he heard a child's laughter, one that had not echoed in years. Once, long before the whispers, she had a name that men sang and children echoed in springtime fields. Maren. Her laughter once filled the same walls where now only silence stayed. She was not born of shadows. The world made her that way. The tavern had belonged to her father, then her husband. Both gone now, to war and winter. The child, too, taken by fever one gray season that never seemed to end. After that, something in her face changed, not broken, just sealed, as if to lock a storm within. Women stopped coming by. The priest called her stubborn. The baker said cursed. But none had stayed through her night of screams, her year of silence. They saw only the woman with herbs hung like trophies and strange roots drying by the hearth. Maren stopped speaking of her loss. Instead, she brewed. Herbs passed from grandmother to girl, flowers for sleep, bark for memory. And soon, those who came with shaking hands or aching heads returned with stories of dreams too vivid, memories too real. Some feared her, some wept and thanked her, but none stayed long. Until the traveler came and drank and stayed by the fire as the wind cried across the stone. He gave no name. His coat was heavy, his shoulders heavier. When Maren asked nothing, he finally spoke, not of the road behind, but of a boy he could still feel in his arms. I see him, he whispered, on riverbanks, holding driftwood like a sword. Then silence, then breath. He died 5 winters ago. His eyes searched the flames like scripture, trying to read some final meaning. She did not ask more. She placed another log on the fire, poured him another cup. Outside, the snowfall thickened like grief. Inside, he told her how the boy would sing songs about the moon and how he, the father, had once scolded him for crying when his dog died. He had not cried when his son did. Not yet. That night, he dreamed. Not just flickers, but moments. His son holding his hand in a field of yellow flowers. He woke with salt on his cheeks and the scent of rosemary in the air. Maren didn't ask, but she noticed. His hands no longer trembled. The people of Dunwell liked their myths tidy and cruel. The Tavern Witch fit neatly into their hunger for blame. But they forgot the girl who taught the village children to read. They forgot the mother who sang lullabies under the window moonlight. They forgot the day she ran through the snow with her baby in her arms, begging the priest to bless her son's fevered body. The door had stayed shut. The boy had died in her arms before the sun rose. So when they spoke of her as cursed, they buried the guilt in laughter and tale. Some even remembered her kindness, but not aloud. The traveler saw none of that. He only saw the silence in her eyes, and the way she moved through the tavern like someone still setting a table for someone not coming home. When he asked for the second brew, his voice was steadier. The tavern's hearth glowed, the snow piled outside like time refusing to pass. This cup, she warned, would not bring dreams. It would bring memory. Unfiltered, unguarded, true. He nodded. He drank. And in that second sleep, he didn't dream of his son. He dreamt of himself, of the night he chose the battlefield over home, of the letter he never wrote, of the guilt buried under duty. He woke, gasping, not for breath, but for forgiveness. Maren was seated near the fire, mending a cloak. She said nothing, but her quiet was full of understanding. He asked, "How do I live with what I saw?" She replied only once, "You don't. But you walk with it, until it learns your name." For 3 days, the storm made travel impossible. He chopped wood without being asked, repaired a broken hinge, cooked once, terribly. She didn't laugh, but her eyes almost did. They spoke little. Silence became their language. In his presence, her face softened, not in romance, but in recognition, of grief shared, of loneliness no longer a punishment, but a pause. He asked about her herbs. She told him of mugwort, for restless dreams, of yarrow, for bleeding that can't be seen. He listened like a student. And for the first time in years, Maren let someone in past her grief. It was the 5th morning when the traveler's presence stirred the village again. A merchant's boy had seen smoke curling strong from the old tavern's chimney, 2 mugs left out on the ledge, steam dancing in the cold air. By sundown, the news had reached Father Emmerich. The priest came not as a shepherd, but a judge, boots thick with snow, eyes burning with old certainties. He stood at the door with the cross heavy in his hand, more shield than offering. When Maren opened it, her face was unreadable. "You've taken in a soul already marked," he warned. "Let him confess and leave. This is no place for healing." The traveler rose behind her, hands quiet at his sides. "I don't need your altar," he said. "I need only her fire." The priest called him deceived, called her worse, witch, widow, sorceress of sleep. Her expression did not flicker. She asked the priest softly, "Did you grieve my son?" Silence cracked like wood and frost. "I brought him to your door. I screamed his name beneath your chapel bell. You would not open." Emmerich turned away. No penance, no blessing. Only his boots in the snow, slowly fading. That night, no one in the village slept peacefully, but 2 souls in the tavern did. The 7th night, the traveler asked Maren if the brew could bring someone back, not as a ghost, not as a vision, but as a question finally answered. She said nothing, only brewed. He drank, and this time, the dream was quieter. A river, clear and slow, with a willow bowed low into its waters. On the opposite bank, the boy, no longer young, but grown, same eyes, same quiet mouth. He did not speak, but waited. The traveler waded across, boots soaked, heart thudding. When he reached the boy, he finally spoke. "I left you to fight a war I didn't believe in. I thought I'd return a hero. I came back to your grave." The boy said only, "You came back to her. That's enough." He woke with tears dried on his cheeks. Maren was already tending the fire. He whispered, "I saw him." She nodded. Sometimes they wait until we're ready to listen. The tavern had changed. The wood seemed warmer, the walls less tight. Even the light danced differently. Grief had not left. It never does. But it had shifted. From silence to story. Maren began placing dried lavender by the door. She opened the shutters in the morning. The traveler stacked kindling like ritual, and every night he brewed a cup, not to forget, but to remember. Once, he asked if she ever dreamed of her son. "Only in spring," she said, "when the snow melts enough to hear the earth again." One evening, she handed him her old ledger. Not spells, not potions, just notes of dreams shared by travelers who drank her tea. A soldier who met the brother he'd betrayed. A widow who danced with her mother again. "These are their dreams," she said, "but also their goodbyes." That night, a knock came after midnight. A man hunched in the doorway, soaked in mud and breathless with fear. "They said she can help," he stammered. "Please, my wife won't wake." Maren moved with quiet certainty. Herbs gathered, a vial from the cupboard, a candle pinched just so. The traveler offered to ride with her. She did not answer, but saddled the horse. Through the marsh they rode, wind sharp and cruel. At the cabin, the woman lay pale and still, breath like thread. Maren laid her palms on the woman's chest, whispered something old, burned sage and cedar, placed rosemary beneath the tongue. By dawn, the woman stirred. The man wept. Maren only said, she chose to return. They left without waiting for thanks. When the snow began to thin and the roads returned, the traveler stood with packed saddlebags. He stared at the hills, at the trail winding back toward the world. Maren poured one last cup. "I was supposed to go east," he said. "I know," she replied, "but I keep dreaming here." She didn't ask him to stay. That wasn't her way. "I could help build a second hearth," he offered, "for those too scared to knock the first time." She looked at him, eyes full of winter and something gentler. "Then start with the door." He unpacked his bags that evening. Years passed, though no one counted them. The tavern never became popular, but it became known. Strangers arrived at dusk, weary and wordless. Some stayed one night, some never left. The village said the woman brewed sleep into submission, but the truth was simpler. She listened, she waited, she gave back what the world had taken. Memories, names, forgiveness. The traveler's hair turned gray. He still brewed each night. Maren still watched the fire, still heard her son in the wind sometimes. But now, she smiled when she did. And when she died, many winters later, the villagers finally gathered. They laid lavender by her door. They wept. And in every cup poured in her memory, there lingered a dream once dreamed too deeply to forget. And some say, on stormy nights, you can still see her light burning on the hill. A tavern built not of wood and stone, but of silence, memory, and mercy.